So we've reached the 8th commandment. Exodus 20, verse 15. It's quite straightforward, really, straight to the point. Don't steal. You see, most of us probably think, well, don't steal. And we have this vision of somebody creeping around in the moonlight, looking for something to take. But that might not be the only form of stealing that we need to think about. So we've been thinking about the 10 Commandments for a little while now, and I think we've said it before, but it's worth repeating. The first 4 commandments really teach us about how our relationship with God should be and how that should develop. The second part of the 10 Commandments, so the last 6 commandments, help us to understand not just about our relationship with God, but also our relationship with each other. So, the 8th command, don't steal. Most societies in the world would understand the importance of not stealing, because it's about keeping people safe, giving people the right to own something that is theirs and belongs to nobody else. When we take something that belongs to somebody else, then I suppose the one thing that we really do show is that we don't care about that person. We have no concept of the consequences of what we're doing. I've moved from outside into our house, and rather than make you concerned about looking at me like this, maybe I'll undo my top a little bit and get the hood off so that we don't look like a monk, as Mandy has said that I do. So the command not to steal, it's not just about keeping people's stuff safe, it's also about protecting the individuals and their feelings. Because, as I say, by stealing something that belongs to somebody else, we cause hurt and upset to that person. So God's plan is to protect people, not just their belongings, but their feelings as well. So yeah, don't steal seems pretty straightforward. And I've given you an image of perhaps our idea of what somebody who's stealing might look like. But actually there's so much more that we can say about not stealing. Examples of stealing might be shoplifting, robbing a bank, burgling somebody's house. And they seem fairly straightforward. But what about other forms of stealing? What about in work, when you don't give your best, or where you maybe disappear for a couple of hours over lunchtime, or maybe you decide that actually you need the paper clips or the stapler more than the organisation that you're working for, and after all it's just a few bits and pieces, so it's not really stealing. But what about the fact that we might steal somebody's reputation? Somebody has built up a good reputation, people know them and trust them, and yet in an instant, by something we say, by something that we post on social media, by highlighting a fault in somebody else, we destroy their reputation, we steal their reputation from them, and they might never recover from that. Another form of stealing, and this is not directed at anybody in particular, you'll understand what I mean in a minute, If you're writing an essay, if you're writing a paper, you might hear something that somebody says, or you might read a paragraph in an article or in a book, and you think, that's really, really good. That fits so well with what I want to say in my essay. And you copy it word for word. But then you don't give credit to the person that wrote it. That's a form of stealing, isn't it? Because you're taking somebody else's words, and instead of giving them credit, you take credit yourself. Or maybe somebody's done a really good job around the place, and the person who perhaps owns that thing or the place or whatever it might be, they come along and they say, wow, this is really good. And they're directing the praise at you, even though you weren't the one who did it. And you steal that pat on the back from somebody else and make it your own. Another area that is a form of stealing, and it might make us a bit uncomfortable because it talks about money and our giving, is what the Bible says in Malachi chapter 3 verse 8. It says about us stealing from God. And we might say to God, well, how are we stealing from you? And God's response is, because we don't give our tithes and offerings. And that's quite a challenge, isn't it? For some of us, that do we really make sure that we give God an appropriate amount of our income? Whatever our income might be, however small or large an income we might have, do we give appropriately to what God instructs in His Word? Do we make sure that we are not stealing from God? So lots of different ways that stealing might be wrong. But there's something that the Bible says that we can do instead. In Ephesians 4:28, it says, if you're a thief, if you're somebody who steals, then stop doing it and start doing good instead. So rather than always looking at the commandments as negative things, maybe we need to think about them all as positive things, positive ways that we can learn more about how we should worship God, and positive ways of how we can understand how we should live together, not just as followers of God, but also as society. So the bottom line is, don't steal. But don't just take it as that narrow, hooded person that might be creeping around your property.